Star Trek just delivered Deep Space Nine's real ending, giving fans what they always wanted. When Star Trek Deep Space Nine ended in 1999, it left fans with one of the most powerful and bittersweet finales in sci-fi television history. Captain Benjamin Sisko fulfilled his destiny as the emissary, saved Bajor from the Dominion, and then ascended to a higher plane of existence with the Prophets, leaving behind his pregnant wife, Cassidy Yates, and his son, Jake. It was haunting, spiritual, and ambiguous, but it wasn't quite closure. For decades, fans have debated what the reckoning of Sisko's journey really meant, and whether he would ever return. Now, more than 2 decades later, Star Trek has finally given Deep Space Nine the ending it always deserved, not in a direct continuation, but through the thoughtful storytelling and emotional resonance of modern Star Trek shows like Star Trek Lower Decks and Star Trek Discovery. Together, they've delivered what feels like DS9's real epilogue, one that honors Sisko's sacrifice, redeems the station's legacy, and celebrates the soul of the series in a way no one expected, the ending that never quite ended. Deep Space Nine was always different. Unlike the Next Generation's utopian diplomacy or Voyager's frontier optimism, DS9 was messy, morally gray, and spiritual. It was the first Star Trek series to make the Federation question itself, and in doing so, it became the most human. But when What You Leave Behind aired, it left a hole that couldn't be filled. Sisko's departure to live among the Prophets, promising he'd return in a year, maybe yesterday, wasn't just an ending, it was an eternal question. What happened to him? What happened to Bajor? Did Jake ever see his father again? The lack of closure was poetic, yes, but it also frustrated generations of fans. The story of DS9 never felt finished. For years, Star Trek moved on to other eras, the Kelvin timeline, Discovery's 32nd century, Picard's return to the stars, while the legacy of DS9 sat quietly in the wormhole, waiting. Lower Decks brought back the soul of DS9. Then, Star Trek Lower Decks did the impossible. In its Season 3 episode Hear All, Trust Nothing, the animated comedy brought the USS Cerritos to the legendary station itself, complete with Quark, Kira, and that familiar Cardassian architecture glistening under Bajor's golden light. It was more than fan service. It was a homecoming. The episode immediately re-established DS9's emotional DNA. Bustling promenade life, political tension, and humor layered over quiet melancholy. Kira Nerys, now a seasoned and centered leader, commanded the station with the authority of someone who had lived through prophecy. Her presence alone said what no dialogue could. DS9 endured. Bajor endured. The wormhole was still glowing. Even Quark's storyline, expanding his bar into a capitalist empire across the quadrant, felt like a fitting evolution for the Ferengi who once symbolized greed, but grew into something far more nuanced. The episode closed not with a battle, but with a moment, Mariner and Boimler simply circling the station in awe as the theme music played. For longtime fans, that brief flyby was the return of DS9's soul. That moment whispered, "We haven't forgotten you." Discovery finally redeemed the Sisko legacy, but Lower Decks wasn't the final word. It was Star Trek Discovery that finally tackled the spiritual weight DS9 carried, and gave Sisko's arc the closure it deserved, even without him appearing on screen. Across its later seasons, Discovery leaned heavily into the same themes that defined Sisko's journey: faith versus science, linear time versus destiny, and the blurred line between divine intervention and human choice. When Discovery jumped to the 32nd century, it introduced the concept of living connections between the cosmos and consciousness, echoes of the Prophet's nonlinear existence. The show's exploration of the Red Angel, the Burn, and the unification of species all echo DS9's great question: can faith and reason coexist in the stars? And in its final seasons, when Michael Burnham became the central figure tasked with understanding ancient intelligences that transcended time, the show subtly mirrored Sisko's story. Burnham, like Sisko, became something more than Starfleet, a bridge between humanity and the divine. Through Burnham, Star Trek finally acknowledged that Sisko's journey wasn't an anomaly. It was part of the Federation's grand tapestry, that the human spirit can reach towards something beyond comprehension without losing its identity. Sisko didn't need to return physically for his presence to be felt. Discovery's final season carried his legacy forward, through a captain who understood what it means to lead not just through logic, but through belief. Bajor's faith wasn't forgotten. DS9's ending was always as much about Bajor as it was about Sisko. The series chronicled the planet's transformation from occupation to freedom to spiritual renaissance. but the Federation's role in Bajor's future was left open-ended. Would it ever join the Federation? Recent Star Trek canon has quietly answered that question. Dialogue in Lower Decks and Picard confirms Bajor eventually became a Federation member world. This single, understated fact is monumental. It means Sisko's dream was fulfilled. His faith in Bajor's destiny was not in vain. It also means the Prophet's plan worked. The trials, the Dominion War, the emissary's sacrifice, all of it guided Bajor to peace and prosperity. The planet that once suffered under Cardassian occupation now stands as a symbol of resilience and hope within the Federation. That's the ultimate closure DS9 fans needed. Not explosions or time travel, but peace. Jake Sisko's story found a voice again. Even more quietly, Jake Sisko's legacy has resurfaced in subtle but beautiful ways across modern Star Trek. The idea of a writer chronicling Starfleet's human stories, the civilian perspective that Jake embodied, now lives on through characters like Beckett Mariner in Lower Decks, and even Jean-Luc Picard's final reflections in Picard Season 3. Jake's final scene in What You Leave Behind, watching the wormhole with his mother, has become a poetic metaphor for the audience itself. We are Jake. We're still waiting for our captain to return, but in the meantime, we keep telling the story. And through every episode of Lower Decks, Discovery, and even Strange New Worlds, the storytelling philosophy of DS9, that Starfleet's greatness is found in its people, not its perfection, continues to thrive. That's Jake's legacy. The wormhole never closes. The magic of Deep Space Nine has always been its refusal to give easy answers. It was never a story about good versus evil. It was about choice versus destiny. The modern Star Trek shows seem to understand that better than ever. Strange New Worlds explores the cost of command and the burden of seeing the future, themes Sisko wrestled with in every prophecy. Discovery explores what happens when Starfleet's ideals are tested in the face of extinction. Lower Decks shows that heroism can exist in the smallest acts of service. Together, these shows form a kind of meta-continuation of DS9, each reflecting a facet of what Sisko's journey represented: faith, sacrifice, and the enduring belief that unity can survive even in the darkest corners of space. Even the wormhole itself, once a symbol of mystery and divine connection, has become a mythic thread across the franchise. Its light may not dominate the screen anymore, but it's always there, shimmering in the background of Star Trek's collective consciousness. The real ending we always wanted. The truth is, Deep Space Nine didn't need a direct sequel or a return of Avery Brooks to find its ending. Its story was never about tying up every thread. It was about faith in what's to come. And now, after 26 years, that faith has been rewarded. Bajor is safe. The Federation endures. The lessons of the emissary live on in the captains who came after him. When Burnham looks into the vastness of the unknown and chooses compassion, that's Sisko. When Pike questions destiny but chooses to embrace hope, that's Sisko. When Mariner finds meaning in service instead of glory, that's Sisko. He is the soul that still guides Star Trek's modern era, unseen, but ever present. DS9's true ending, then, isn't about the emissary returning from the Celestial Temple. It's about the galaxy he left behind, one that finally understands what he stood for. What you leave behind lives on. In the end, Star Trek didn't just count,